Kwe. Okay, this video is going to be about Kuji Kiri, but in this particular case about the Amida Kuji Kiri and the benefits of Amida Kuji Kiri over the sort of traditional Kuji Kiri. So yeah, the original Kuji Kiri, as everyone knows, rin-pyo-to shakaijin ritzaizin, right? And then the 9 characters, and there's so much meaning associated with what each character means and how each character forms a sentence and what it means. It's a Taoist in origin, its whole connection to like lightning, class of spirits, etc., etc., etc. And then the whole method of the 10th symbol, Juji, the 10th kanji, the 10th character. And the 10th character, generally speaking, a lot of times you will see in traditions where they'll say un, and what un means, interestingly enough, is it's actually it's weird how it happens, but it's the syllable hum, H-U-M, Sanskrit H-U-M, then you get into like Tibet, Bhutan, Mongolia, it's H-U-N-G, hum, and then in Japan it just manifests as un or un, right? But the whole point is it's hum, un, same difference. So but in a lot of the Juji traditions where they say un at the end, then they just do like a check mark. So it's kind of like a little disoriented, or a little like doesn't make exact sense. There's some kind of evolution of how it went from one thing to another, but it's not entirely clear. And to me, there's probably somebody out there who can explain exactly how hung as the 10th syllable became un as a check mark, etc. I don't know how that happened. The other thing that happens though is that a lot of times the 10th syllable can not be un, but can actually be a particular kanji. That's very popular, that's very common. The most common one, or the one that you see usually in like samurai manuals, shinobi manuals, samurai manuals, which we know shinobi manuals are samurai spy manuals. So in samurai manuals, bushi manuals, you'll see katsu, which means victory, is one of the most common ones. And then I've seen a couple scrolls where they just list a whole bunch. Actually, I think Anthony has a scroll, and I think I have a digital copy of it somewhere. I didn't think about it until just now, but it goes through the kuji, and you can draw. There's different shapes. It's not always a grid. Sometimes it's a grid. Sometimes it's a circle. Sometimes it's like weird geometric shapes. There's different meanings for the shape that you draw. It's 9 slashes, but they're not always in that grid pattern. So it goes through, like there's one, the grid pattern is the most famous, and then there's another one that looks almost like a staircase. Like you make the slashes, you start up high and then you slash 9 on the way down. There's one that's a circle, etc., etc., etc. So the slash pattern has a meaning, and the syllables have a meaning. But that last character, the 10th character, like I said, Gatsu is usually the most popular one. It just means victory. So you literally just visualize and or cut the kanji for victory as the 10th mark. But usually that's where I guess that's where the check comes in then, because now I'm thinking about what that scroll's saying. Instead of cutting the last one or visualizing it, you just do the check mark. And the check mark in your mind is visualized as that character. So rather than slashing the entire character out, it's just the 10th slash, basically the check, almost like a check mark. And then you have visualized, like with each slash, you have to visualize that kanji or that character. So you'd be like rin-pyo-to shakaijin ritzaizin, and then you would like see the kanji rin-pyo-to for each line, and then on that last one you would throw. In that system, each character, each slash remains the same. Rin-pyo-to shakaijin, it's the same, but then the check would have whatever kanji you're superimposing onto that slash. Which in this particular case, like I said, Gatsu is the most is the sort of the one that most of the scrolls agree is good in any situation. But there are other samurai Kuji Kiri manuals, and like this one scroll that I seen when I'm talking about it actually lists, I think, like 10 or 15 different possible characters for the 10th slash, and then it goes into detail about what that character's for and why you use that character, and the circumstances of using that character, etc., etc., etc. Oh, sorry about that. But now, so that's the standard edition or the standard version. In the rin-pyo-to shakaijin rezaizen un, whatever, and then on that un you replace it with whatever kanji for whatever your particular purpose is. Now, for the Amitabha version, which is the esoteric Pure Land version, which is the version that I prefer, the version that I think is ultimately the superior version, or everyone, I think most people now know that the original version is a Taoist practice, and it's originally related to light, basically thunder spirits, heavenly beings. It's an invocation, protective kind of exorcism, etc., etc., etc. And essentially it just invokes particular deities in order to sort of secure safety, etc., etc., etc. Again, the explanations sort of, there's multiple explanations, so to give an exact meaning is the most you can really say is it's kind of like, well, it's similar to the same way that like a paper spell works. It invokes particular heavenly beings, particularly thunder spirits, is my understanding from the original sort of record of the 9 characters, the thunder spirits, and then basically to protect you, to clear clear negativities from your way. A lot of times people say it's a kind of like an exorcism, but it is in like sort of folk Taoism can be used as exorcism, but it's more like just to expel negativity, not so much like something's possessed and you want to kick spirits out of it. Not exactly like that, but anyway. The Amitabha version though is different. The Amitabha version, instead of rin-pyo-to shakaijin rezaizen, it's a-miri-ta, tei-sei, right? So if you were to, I'll try to maybe put it in the comment or in the explanation below. But it's a mantra which is Amida Butsu, which is basically like paying homage to the fact that Amitabha is there. Like one of the aspects of Amitabha is they always call was Amitabha the Buddha of boundless light, but also known as Amitayu, or the Buddha of infinite life, or the deathless one. So in this particular case, Amitabha is being referred to by the Amitayu title, meaning like the Buddha of infinite life force, or the Buddha of immortality in that way. And so so it's the syllables. Now, if you see it written out, it's a little confusing at first because the third syllable looks like it's 2. You would say om, and when it's written out, it looks like miri, like M-I-R-I, but that's really just kind of like slurred into like one syllable, like mri, right? So om, amrita, teje, like that, right? So and like for example, people know like the different Amitabha, like there's Namu Amida Butsu, right? The Nimbutsu, or basically which is like homage to Amitabha Buddha. And then there's like different mantras, like that, for like practitioners who accumulate the mantra on a daily basis. Now those, the thing, and then there's om amrita, right? So those are Amitabha mantras. Generally speaking, yes, you have to have empowerment, but the thing is also, for the rin-pyo-to shakai to actually work, the original Kuji Kiri, you also have to have the Taoist version of an empowerment, or a Taoist transmission of authority and power. So the thing is, at least for like Amitabha, because Amitabha is what's called the Lotus family, or the Western Pure Land, Sukhavati. It's in Tibetan, Dewachin, Jodo, the Pure Land, etc. Same day, the Western Paradise, etc., etc. All these different names. One of the qualities is that, even without empowerment, focusing on that Buddha still brings the result. Empowerment makes it more definitive, but even without empowerment, visualizing Amitabha Buddha, calling out to Amitabha Buddha, etc., 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 still has great benefit, right? So it's kind of, they say the same thing about Avalokiteshvara, for example, or Kanan, Chindrazi, whatever name you choose to use. Even if you don't have the actual ritual empowerment, you can still visualize and do the mantra and call out and receive benefit. There's certain tantric deities or Buddhas which empowerment is best, but if you don't have empowerment, you can still utilize the practice to some extent, particularly Western deities like Amitabha and Chindrazi or Avalokiteshvara. So the point being that so then you have two options. You can either go with the Taoist version or you can go with the Buddhist version, right? And the Taoist version was subsumed within some Buddhist practice, but it's still, again, one of the issues is it requires empowerment, like legitly, like if any of the Mikyo practices where they do the rin-pyo-to, it still requires initiation. And if you want the original Taoist version, it still requires a Taoist transmission of power. So actually the Amitabha Pure Land version has the potential to benefit you even if you don't have the sort of empowerment, right? I'm not saying that it benefits in the exact same way, but what I'm saying is like you pretty much, like, if you don't have the proper initiations for the rin-pyo-to shakaijin, you're getting no result. So and now there's a lot of people that go on and on about how there's no actual magic, it's just psychology. That's actually very insulting, because what you're doing is you're saying that the religious principles, the religious practices of the Bushi and of many people, because there's many Japanese people who aren't Shizoku or have no Bushi heritage that utilize Kuji Kiri, you're basically saying that their religion is fake and it doesn't mean anything and that it's just like made up. But then, even though you're openly saying that it's not real and it's made up and it's just like, playing around, that you still want to imitate it. That's incredibly insulting. And I mean, I shouldn't have to explain why that's insulting. It's like saying that it's like treating somebody's religious practices as a game that you can take and discard at your will. And first off, that's cultural appropriation, which is disgusting, but it's also just downright insulting. So I would highly, highly advise anybody listening to this video to not believe that Kuji Kiri is just some kind of psychological game, and that it doesn't mean anything more than just kind of like psychologically doing, thinking about stuff. That's a deep insult to call Kuji Kiri just a psychological tool. It's a very deep insult. That having been said, there are some other people who say that they want to do Kuji Kiri, but they don't want to do any Kuji Kiri that involves any kind of Buddhist deities or Taoist deities or Shinto deities. And that's ridiculous, because it's just impossible. The original Kuji Kiri is a Taoist spell which invokes Taoist deities, or different heavenly beings and nature spirits. It's not possible to do Kuji Kiri without doing that. And if you do a Buddhist version of Kuji Kiri, you're going to be like paying homage to and calling out to different Buddhas or tantric deities. So again, saying that you want to do Kuji Kiri but you don't want to involve the religious aspects of Kuji Kiri is the same as saying Kuji Kiri is only a psychological game. So that's a very deeply insulting. So my suggestion is, is if you don't believe Kuji Kiri actually works, or you believe Kuji Kiri is only a psychological kind of game, then don't even pretend. Just don't do it at all. Right? Better to just never do anything with Kuji Kiri than to insult the practitioners of Kuji Kiri by saying that it's just a game or that it's just a mind game. And if you want to do Kuji Kiri but you don't want to involve yourself with different Shinto, Taoist, or Buddhist deities, then I advise don't do Kuji Kiri, because again, it's not possible. It's like you want Kuji Kiri but you don't want Kuji Kiri. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, so it kind of makes it sound like you want to sit there and like play with your fingers cutting in the air and think that you look cool, but you don't want to actually really do it. So that's one thing, of course, if you're just playing around, like in reenacting or just having fun, that's fine. As long as you remember that you're just playing around. Don't believe and don't try to convince other people that you're doing it for real when you don't really believe in it. And then don't turn around and tell people that, oh, this Kuji Kiri is just a mind game. It's just something people do to psych themselves up before battle. That's just deeply insulting. So having addressed those points, the Amitabha or the Amida Kuji Kiri is on amrita teje hara on, which amrita teje hara, right? So for each of those syllables, you do one of your slashes. You can do the grid, you can do stars, you can do circles, you can do the ladder, you can whatever. But fundamentally stick with the grid, because basically the grid is the one which is kind of like the grid to dispel, like kind of like a net. So you probably, actually, I take that back. You probably shouldn't play with any other shapes, because then you'd have to have an explanation of why each shape. So best to just stick with a grid, right? The grid is like a shield or a net, in front of you, so to speak. So you just make your slashes, right? There you go. There's your 9 slashes. Now, when you're making those slashes, each syllable of that mantra is like a devotional action toward Amitabha. So this entire Kuji is like taking the Kuji method and bringing it into this aspect of Amitabha, which, if you know about like Kakuban's writings, for example, he's explaining how all Buddhas are equal. Each Buddha is inseparable with every other Buddha. So what he's basically saying is like Amitabha and Dainichi Nyorai are inseparable, right? Because both are of the enlightened mind, and the enlightened mind is empty in nature, meaning it's free of hindrances, free of shape, form, color, etc. Meaning that the mind of Dainichi is not the same mind, but is equivalent, right, to the mind of Amitabha. Therefore, Amitabha Buddha knows the mind of Dainichi Nyorai, and Dainichi Nyorai knows the mind of Amitabha, and they're both equally free, etc., etc. So that's how they're equal. It's not saying that all the Buddhas are stemming from the same single consciousness. That idea of a single consciousness being in everybody, that is actually not Dharma, and Nagarjuna wrote a treatise on that, expressly explaining why that is not the reality of that Dharma teaches, but that each of the consciousnesses are their own consciousness, but the quality of it is equivalent. And so therefore, like Dainichi Nyorai is enlightened, Amitabha Buddha is enlightened, and they are equally enlightened, so therefore they are equal in their quality, right? So therefore, this is, for example, like how Shakyamuni Buddha taught about Amitabha, because Shakyamuni Buddha, when he was enlightened, he's aware of Amitabha's mind, right? And therefore he can speak on behalf of Amitabha because he's aware of Amitabha, right? In that way. So in that regard, when you're doing this Kuji, you're basically, rather than invoking worldly gods, you're invoking Amitabha Buddha. You're invoking this deathless quality, this infinite light, deathless quality. And what this does is, this on so many levels, it serves the same function as the traditional Kuji Kiri, but it also serves the double function of evoking and paying homage to a Buddha, which is the accumulation of merit and wisdom. And it also serves to protect you in case you die. Like, for example, if you use, the rin-pyo-to and you end up dying anyway, because the thing is this, is there's no way to be 100% guaranteed that, like, you will be protected. Because that's just not how karma works, like in terms of, like in the Bansen Shukai, it talks about, like your time of death is already sort of set. Meaning, what that means is that the cause for your death is already planted, right? And if you stumble upon the conditions for your death, and the cause of your death is set, and the conditions for that death are set, and you stumble upon them, then it's just, there's no way to really avoid it. You're going to die, right? So you have karmic death, or death caused about by the coming together of the karmic seed and the karmic conditions to cause death. Then you also have what they call untimely death, or a death that's born of karma, obviously, but it's not as strong, like, extremely well set and entrenched karmic death, versus, again, what is called untimely death. It's still based on cause and effect and karma, but it's more preventable. So in other words, the real question here is, how strong is the karma, right? So if you do your Kuji Kiri and you stumble upon the cause and condition of an extremely strong cause and conditions, you probably die irregardless, right? Because you're not free of cause and you're not free of your karma. Because even the text, they say that, like, if even the Buddhas, have the intention to free all beings, beings are still, from their perspective, from the side of sentient beings, are still bound to their karma. So even though Buddha is there to sort of like try to protect you, because you yourself are unenlightened and still bound by causality, you still have to die, right? So because of that, so say you do rin-pyo-to Shakaijin, and you die, right? Well, rin-pyo-to Shakaijin is asking for assistance from worldly gods and worldly spirits. So sometimes those worldly beings are just less powerful. They are not sometimes. Worldly gods are always less powerful than Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. But even they may be powerful enough, sometimes they get fickle. Sometimes they choose not to help you. Sometimes they choose not to help you a lot. Sometimes maybe they could have helped you, but just didn't put out enough effort, because the worldly gods are still bound by causality, right? They're still subject to emotions and subject to shortcomings, etc., etc. So by doing the Kuji Kiri toward worldly gods, you're basically going to an inferior source. You're asking for like a less powerful protection, right? And then if you die under the influence of Kuji Kiri, right, then there's nothing they can do to help you in the after-death state, right? What is called the intermediate state between this life and your next life. They can't help you in that state. So, and they can't really help you purify karma or anything. So there's really, if you do it and it works, fine, but in terms of a fail-safe, if you do it and it doesn't work, then there's no other protection. But if you do Kuji Kiri from Amitabha Kuji Kiri, a-miri-ta, tei-sei, right? Then what happens is, first off, you're invoking Amitabha Buddha, which means you're going to like one of the best sources, right? And then if you happen to stumble upon some kind of karmic landmine, for lack of a better word, and you die, then at least you're dying under the influence of maintaining Amitabha Buddha as the object of mental concentration. Meaning, you died with Amitabha Buddha on your mind. And as all of the sutras and stuff explain, if you die with Amitabha Buddha on your mind, then that is cause to go to the Western Pure Land. So therefore, not only is the protection stronger while you're alive, but then if it fails because of your own karma, then you have the opportunity to go to the Pure Land. So it protects you in death as well. So the Amitabha Kuji Kiri protects you in life, and it also protects you in death. Whereas the normal Taoist one protects you somewhat in life and doesn't protect you at all in death. Also, the other thing to remember too is there's all of the different classes of beings that sort of pay homage to and bow down to Buddhas are subsumed within the invocation of that Buddha. So therefore, such a Buddha like Amitabha, just all these classes of beings pay homage to Amitabha. So by paying homage to Amitabha, you sort of are running alongside them. So that's what's called, worldly deities subsumed within the homage to the enlightened ones, right? So from, I don't know, I guess you could say even from like a capitalist perspective, right? The best bang for your buck would be to do the Amitabha Kuji. Yeah, because it has the most potential, and then so now the thing here is that the last syllable. So now we talked about the syllable. So you can do rin-pyo-to or you can do a-miri-ta. Whichever. I would suggest do the a-miri-ta myself particularly. But so in the rin-pyo version, it's you just and you do whatever kanji or character, right? And then for this Amitabha one, the character is the seed syllable, and I'm going to use the Sanskrit versions because that way it'll be easier. Because it's interesting because when there's the Sanskrit syllable and then the way that it is, but it gets a little confusing when you go with like Japanese pronunciations and stuff. So I'm gonna stick with the Sanskrit in this case. Use the syllable a, and there's three different types of a. There's basic a, there's medium a, then there's profound a. You can use any of them, right? And then there's the seed syllable for Amitabha, which again I'll use the Sanskrit, is Hrih. And then if you were to do like rin-pyo-to, like a-miri-ta, you do the Amitabha one. Then when you get to the character, you would just sort of intone that syllable, and then the sword hand that you were sort of slashing with, so to speak, you could just sort of. There's two ways to do it. Like if you're cutting in the air, then you just visualize the syllable and you say it, and then you grab it with your hand. There's another version where you actually use your right hand, and instead of a sword cutting through the air, you visualize it as like a brush, and you paint it onto your left hand. If you do it that way, then you just write the syllable on your left hand, and then you close your hand. So either way, whether you've cut it in air and then grabbed it from the air, or you've written it on your hand and held it in your hand, the point is that once you do the cuts and then you hold it, and then as you hold it, you're thinking of Amitabha, infinite light, and infinite life, right? So the you can either just visualize like the syllable, or you can visualize, you're supposed to visualize the syllable, but you can also visualize the Amitabha Buddha radiating light as well, and then you go through the gate, cross the bridge, whatever it is that you're trying to that's dangerous that you're trying to get past. Like, for example, if you're going over a bridge and you're concerned the bridge might collapse, or you're concerned there might be ghosts or demons on the bridge, or you're going through some kind of forest and you're not sure, maybe there's bandits, maybe there's just like some kind of demons in the woods or ghosts or something, or you have to enter a house and the house is supposedly very haunted, or something, things like that. Now, this is where people say, oh, this is where Kuji Kiri is just a psychological tool. But again, I really it would be nice if people would stop that, because that assumes, one, that all of this sort of belief in the ghost and the demons and the gods is false, and that they don't actually exist. but that, you know, like us stupid people who believe in that are then like playing psychological games with ourselves when we do like Kuji Kiri in order to go into what we claim to be a haunted house, something like that. It brings the question of like why you know, kind of why insult samurai culture, you know, that way, or samurai culture and or people who are somehow connected to the samurai culture. Like obviously, you know, everybody knows, I think at this point, that I'm not Japanese, obviously, but my family, like my whole family is, right? I'm like the one non-Japanese that I see every day, right? So but anyway, the point is that uh, if you don't believe it, you don't believe it, that's fine, but maybe, like, you know, don't go around saying that there's no such thing, it's just folk belief, and that Kuji Kiri is just psychology. I mean, if you believe it, okay, that's fine, but you know, it's kind of insulting to go around and say that. Like, there's a lot of people that post on the internet about Kuji Kiri, and they're always saying that like it's just psychology, and that's just, again, that's very insulting. So my whole thing is that, like, if you don't believe it, that's fine, but don't talk about it then. Like, if you don't believe Kuji Kiri is real, then just don't talk about it, you know? Don't make up your own Kuji Kiri. Don't pretend that you've been trained, that you know about Kuji Kiri. Like, you know what I mean? Just don't, and please, like, seriously, don't insult people by saying that it's all just a game. It was very just inappropriate. There's like a lack of manners, a lack of etiquette. It's shameful on so many levels. You know, if you don't believe it, that's fine, but don't pretend it, and don't, you know, like, make up your own stuff. Especially if you don't believe it, that's just weird. You know, that's just inappropriate. So, and so anyway, like I said, so you do the cuts, you do the mantra, or you do the syllables, da da da. You do the cuts, you hold the syllable, you do whatever action that you need to do to, and then when you're done and you leave the location, after so many sort of paces away from the location, and you sort of like feel, okay, I'm far enough away, right? Then you just open your hand again, and just visualize the syllable kind of just dissolving into space, and then you can even sort of like blow on your hand and visualize again the syllable just sort of becoming inseparable with space. And that's about it. You know, that sort of brings an end to it. There's nothing else to be done, you know, because it's just merged back with space, and it's, for the most part, no longer manifested. Anyway, so that is a 33-minute kind of monologue about this, but the point that I guess I wanted to make is that, especially since I'm going to be getting back into I'm supposed to be doing more of this Fukushimaru Shinobu no Maki commentary, or I should say Sacred Conspiracy commentary, because Sacred Conspiracy is a commentary on the Fukushimaru Shinobu no Maki, so it's like a double commentary, a commentary of a commentary. But as I stopped because I was getting to a point, I got to the beginning, and it's like, you know, the very first thing in the manual is the dream, interlocking dream spell. So the thing is, I was like, you know, I don't know if I want to do this or not, because a lot of time and effort were put into explaining this just to have people say that it's psychology, and that it's just, you know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Psychology or superstition. And I just really didn't feel like putting a lot of time and effort just to have people say, oh, that's just superstition. You know, that's just like, oh, those silly people with their fake beliefs. However, I decided to make this Kuji Kiri video to kind of put myself back into a mindset of going, okay, well, I know lots of people will say that it's superstition and just psychology, but I think I'm going to go ahead and continue the audio commentary, and just let people respond to it however they respond to it. But this one is kind of like the opening, kind of getting myself back into the mindset. So that having been said, again, if you don't believe in Kuji Kiri, or you have it, or you don't really have a history of any kind of like Taoist initiation or Tantric Buddhist initiation, but the thing about the Amitabha thing is it's not exact. Again, certain deities, it requires empowerment if it comes from the Tantras, but these are coming specifically from Mahayana sutras. So the thing is that you can call the Amitabha Buddha, you can visualize Amitabha Buddha, you can say Amitabha mantra, because these things are coming from the sutras. So it's one of those things where usually, yes, something like this would require an initiation, and if you have like an Amitabha empowerment or initiation, that's obviously the best. But even if you're just like really basic beginner, you know, it's best, of course, obviously, if you are Buddhist, if you've taken refuge vows, etc. But even if you at least just sort of trust and have respect to Buddhas, then that's good, you know. But yeah, so ideally this would require, you know, ideally you would have more involvement with Buddhism, but as the sutras themselves say, you know, if you just kind of like invoke Amitabha Buddha with the proper mind, you know, then there's benefit. So and also, you know, there's a Kakuban, Kakuban, Kakuban. If you read his work, he has all kinds of text on more esoteric aspects of Amitabha Buddha. So it's really good to look at those. So I guess if anybody has any questions, you can post them in the comments below. I'm not saying that after listening to this video that you should go do Kuji Kiri. I'm just making this video to explain like the mechanics and the difference, and then also my sort of appeal that you don't believe that it's purely superstition. But this video is not an instructional video, and this video is not a permission video. There's no kind of like transmission of anything in the course of listening to this audio video. This audio. So now that I've made that clear, I think now I can end it. I think I can end it now that I've made that clear. This is not an instruction, and this is not a permission or a transmission in any way, shape, or form. This is just a monologue about normal Kuji Kiri and Amitabha Kuji Kiri, and the fact that I believe, I advise that Amitabha Kuji Kiri is more profound than the Taoist version. Right. That's it.